this teaching of the millennium will end up leading people to accept the false Messiah. That's why it's so important. And I'll add to that, at that time, people will use this text in John saying that if you don't believe that this false Messiah, which they think is the true Messiah, has come in the flesh and has come back to set everything straight, if you don't believe that this is the true Messiah, then you are of the antichrist and you deserve the death sentence. That's where this is going.
It says, talking about how you test false prophets. And so in verse 2, it said, 4:2 says, this is how we know if they have the Spirit of God. If a person claiming to be a prophet acknowledges that Yeshua came in the flesh, that person has the Spirit of God. But if someone claims to be a prophet and does not acknowledge the truth about Yeshua, that person is not from God. Insofar as, say, like the false prophets of today, is that allowing, is Jehovah allowing them to lie?
That's a really great question. A really great question that I struggled with those verses. And anyone want to try those verses to see if we can make some sense out of it? The reason why I brought the verse 24, he who abides in us by the Spirit whom he has given us. So the word Spirit there, and I don't want to be dogmatic about this, but if we've been given a spirit, that's what the word says, the ministering spirits who have been sent to those, I believe that's in Hebrews somewhere, sent to those that are going to inherit salvation. So we have a spirit. I believe I have a spirit that is given to me by God who leads me on a daily basis. Now that doesn't negate the work of the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God, but they work in connection with the Spirit of God. And so I have a one-on-one, at least a one-on-one, and as things get closer to the end, it may be I'll have 3, because some people have walked away from their guiding spirit, if you will, and they're going to be putting more effort on those that are left, and so they may have more, they may have an army of angels around them. You know, and like I say, I'm not being dogmatic here. I'm just trying to reason with what the word says. And so the reason why I brought verse 24 into it, because the word Spirit there in my translation is capitalized in verse 24. But it doesn't necessarily need to be capitalized in the context. It could be a ministering spirit, because the Father sends us ministering spirits. So it could be my spirit. So let's just read that in that sort of context here. Now he keeps his commandments, abides in him, and he in him, and by this we know that he abides in us, that the Spirit whom by the Spirit whom he has given us. So yes, we have the Spirit of Yeshua in us, but we also have ministering spirits that are working with us as well. And so in the context, it looks like he might be sort of referring to that, because the very next verse says, do not believe every spirit. Well, there's the spirit of Antichrist and there's the Spirit of God. But if we're talking about now don't believe every spirit, so in the context, we're talking about other spirits, plural. So
Right.
we're talking
Okay.
about those that possibly could leave the throne room of God that are evil spirits. And God says, be careful. Don't believe all those spirits that are out there. So this we said, and then he goes on to say, by this we know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua the Christ has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Yeshua has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of antichrist. Let me try my explanation here and see what you guys think. So we know by what we've just read is that there are spirits, there are good spirits, there are bad spirits. The bad spirits influence the false prophets. That's what this says. Don't believe every spirit, because many false prophets. So these false prophets aren't the bad spirits per se, technically, but they're listening to the spirits. That's what we just read about in Chronicles, and it's also in Kings. The evil spirits were influencing the false prophets to say certain things that were untrue. They do the same work today. And they work through the false prophets of the church. But the problem is a lot of people don't think they're false prophets. They think they're true prophets. They're confused on what the true is and what the false is, and they're listening to evil spirits through the false prophets. That's the warning. That's how it works. That's how it's worked in the past. That's how it's worked today. And that's how it's going to work in the future in the book of Revelation. We see that clearly in the book of Revelation, where the demons are working through the kings of the earth. That's how it works. That's part of the science of salvation. If we don't understand this, we're going to get tripped up because we don't understand the pitfalls. So it's part of the science of how salvation works. Very important for us to get this. So here we go. Here's my attempt after really struggling with this for a long, long time. At the time that Yeshua was walking the earth, declaring himself to be the Son of God, he was being accused by the false prophets amongst God's people that he was working through Beelzebub. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But the disciples, when they finally got it, were saying that this was God that has come in the flesh. That was the truth of the day, is that Yeshua was God himself, the Son of God, had come in the flesh. And so the teachers at that time, there was confusion on who Yeshua was. Was he God? Was he a prophet? Was he a false prophet? And so the word from John was, if those people that you're listening to are confessing that, yes, Yeshua was the Son of God, has come in the flesh, then he's of God.
Right.
But while this is still true today, it's not true in a sense, because what was truth back then, now we've learned the lessons of the past, and we've got people in all Christian churches now, not all, because they don't all teach the same thing, but basically they all say that Jesus has come in the flesh and he was the Son of God. So we cannot use this today as a proof that people are speaking from God's messengers, because they're all saying this now.
Right.
So I would propose that there are other truths today that are present truth that are being confused today.
Well, could it not also be that, I mean, to me, I kind of look at in people being influenced by spirits, it's kind of like the little devil that sits on your shoulder and the angel. I mean, could not people be influenced by one and then the other have greater influence over them? I mean,
Well, Yeah, and that's, you know, we've seen those pictures, and that's kind of what you're referring to. But it's reality, right? We have,
right.
you know, we're supposed to, I think it's in Corinthians, where we're supposed to cast down imaginations and things in our mind that are opposed themselves against God. And a lot of times in James it says we're led away by our own desires. You know, we've created things in our own hearts that we want or that we think we need. Somehow, wants probably would be the best word. We know we don't need what is against what God wants for us, but because of our own desires. But that doesn't say that Satan's not leading us there. He's not directing our path. He's not putting people in our path. And this is what we don't really seem to grasp, is that he has the ability to put people in our path to lead us down the wrong path. He's got that kind of power. And this is what we see in these stories, these dialogues in the Old Testament. He arranged things to happen here that led the false prophets to teach certain things that were clearly not true. And he has that same ability. So we have to weigh everything. We have to weigh everything by what the Word says. And, you know, the idea that Solomon said, hey, we need to put counselors around us. We all need to put counselors around us. I do that. We all need to do that. And then we have at least a chance to go down the right road. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I believe,
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I believe back then it was an absolute truth. It's still an absolute truth, but we've moved beyond that truth. We're further down the road in that truth. There's other truths that God is bringing out. Yeah, there's other truths that God is bringing out now that I can say that if someone doesn't believe this, they are of the Antichrist. I can say that with full confidence today, that there are truths today that if a person goes against, they are following the Antichrist. And I've said that in some presentations regarding certain things. And I'll just drop this bomb because we're amongst friends. The teaching of what happens during the millennium determines where you're going to end up. And I believe that the millennium, the teaching of the millennium, is probably the most clever device of Satan that he has ever had. Yeah. And many destruction will come upon them because of this teaching. The millennial teaching alone is his golden jewel, his diamond that he's using to lead people astray. And most of the false prophets are teaching contrary to what the Word says on this. Yeah. And we've got a number of teachings on the millennium, and the reason is because I believe it's such an important teaching, and I believe that it's not as important as this one teaching that we see, because obviously we need to understand that Yeshua is the Son of God come in the flesh. But this teaching of the millennium will end up leading people to accept the false Messiah. That's why it's so important. And I'll add to that, at that time, people will use this text in John saying that if you don't believe that this false Messiah, which they think is the true Messiah, has come in the flesh and has come back to set everything straight, if you don't believe that this is the true Messiah, then you are of the Antichrist and you deserve the death sentence. That's where this is going.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you.